Our meeting is now open for the sharing of testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Shaheed from Maryland, go ahead.
Good evening. I would like to express my gratitude tonight for our website and all the wonderful gems that it contains. Excuse me. Last week I found myself in a bit of a funk. I went to the website to reread an article that my practitioner had previously directed me to. And after I read that article through, my eye caught another article called The Devil's Auction. This article contains a wonderful teaching point that the devil's best tool to spoil a life is discouragement. That's when it hit me that what I had been feeling was indeed discouragement and a general sense of discontentment. The article goes on to say that the only time the devil's prized tool was ineffective was in a grateful heart. I remember thinking, well, I have a ton to be grateful for, so discouragement should not be finding a toehold in my heart. But clearly I needed to be doing a better job of remembering and expressing my gratitude for my blessings. Just knowing it was not enough. I'm very thankful to God tonight for leading me to this church and for the great practitioner help that I've found here. Thank you.
Thank you. Craig.
Those were tremendous readings. I thank the reader. And I want to give gratitude for our lesson, particularly this week. But the lessons have been such a protection for me over the years. It just keep me tuned up. So I know who I am. Before I came to this church, I thought I knew who I was, but I didn't. I come to the conclusion that free will is not all that it's made up to be. Because you really only know yourself when you know God, I've learned here, and it's true, and it's protected me so many times. If you know what God is, you stop looking away from the body and just judging you by your style of your hair or your clothes, but you look deeper and you think about, what would God do in these cases? What would God say in these cases? Throughout your days in life, and it has been direction for me. And with these lessons, it does remind me throughout history how people have done the same thing, and for great gratitude to God for his dear loving kindness in whatever situation they were in. Well, and it says in Recapitulation of Science and Health, man is not matter. He is not made up of brain, blood, bones, and other material elements. And it just gives me a strength to stop and filter thoughts and say, is this from God, or is this just taking me back to some material wrong or situation? If so, that's not how I should be dealing with it, but I need to pray and listen to what God would be doing. And it has repeatedly, as long as I'm patient, just given me the right answer in the right direction over the years. I can't help but to thank God for all of that. And in the end, I always wind up with a quiet, where I only hear what the right is. And I thank Mary Vickeretti for helping me to find myself as God's child.
Thank you. Chardell.
Thank you for the readings on God, omnipresent love with us, and our lovely music. Tonight, I would like to say how grateful I am to be here and offer gratitude for being a member of this most holy church. A practitioner recently said, quote, "We keep the standard in love," end quote. This church physically houses sacred meetings, books, workers far and near, and lots of technology, but truly is the center of spiritual church that reaches all over God's kingdom. Just think about that. I found something I would like to share from Miscellaneous Writings, page 104. This tells me what our church does. Quote, "How shall we reach our true selves? through love. The principle of Christian Science is love, and its idea represents love. This principle and idea are demonstrated in healing to be God and the real man, end quote. Mrs. Eddy goes on to say, quote, "Who wants to be mortal or would not gain the true ideal of life and recover his own individuality? This is a good question." Thank you, Plainfield Church, Independent.
Thank you. Jim from Arizona, go ahead.
Good evening. Recently, upon getting up, I had a runny nose. Telling my practitioner about the beginning of a cold, she suggested that I read and review Mrs. Eddy's article, "I've Got Cold," found in Miscellaneous Writings. Immediately, I started reading the article, and before I'd completed the article, signs of the cold had nearly disappeared. The following day, I was clear of any indication of a cold. I am most grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Day from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. Today's Bible quote reads, "An understanding of God's power is equal to every emergency," unquote. This is something that I've learned through Christian Science in this church and have been able to put into practice by immediately and consistently declaring and affirming God's allness when faced with the suggestion of any emergency, whether in my own experience or in the experience of another. Declaring God's allness immediately reminds me of His omnipresence, giving me comfort, His omniscience, giving me confidence, and His omnipotence, giving me needed courage. The emphasis of omni, or all, assures me that there is no room for anything apart from good to exist, to act, or to affect me or anyone. I'm finding that this is the only form of perfect protection, and I'm grateful for each experience, which moves me to trust in it more. I'm so thankful for all that we're learning in this church, which is strengthening me and the entire world. Thank you so much for tonight's meeting and for all the testimonies. I'm grateful to be here.
Thank you. Colleen from Massachusetts, go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you so much for the readings tonight and the beautiful music. They just mean so much to me. I'd like to give thanks for the Bible lessons. They're so rich. I love to read them over and over and listen to them on the audio. I feel that every member of this church is like a radiating light, and everything is inspired. Everyone that speaks and contributes at a round table or a Bible study or a lesson, or if there's the singers or giving testimonies, it is inspired. And I learn from everyone in every different way. I'm very grateful for this church. I'm very grateful for the suggestion of making a gratitude list from the round table last Sunday. I've been putting this into practice. Before I go to sleep at night, I close my eyes and I just start thinking of all the things I'm grateful for from the day and just everything that comes in my mind. And then I just gently drift off to sleep. And it's just a beautiful way to end the day. And then in the morning, I like to jump up and read this scientific statement of being and really go forward with the day with that. So I thank everyone in this church. It's a beautiful church, and it's given me a beautiful way to live. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Barbara or Ken, go ahead.
Hi. This last week, from the Plainfield Audio Library, in the Additional Gems section, I listened to Bliss Knapp on the subject of the Woodbury trial. The audio includes very important as well as interesting information on the subject of the woman of the apocalypse. What fun as an added bonus to hear the voice of one who knew Mrs. Eddy. The weekend Bible study and roundtable were most helpful, and I appreciated also Mrs. Singleterry's sensible suggestion shared during one or the other then or recently of taking the phone off the hook while studying the Bible lesson, doing a watch, etc. How helpful. Thank you, Plainfield. Thank you, God.
Thank you. Linda.
Thank you for the service tonight. I am very grateful for the continual teachings at Plainfield that is challenging the thoughts that turn us inward, causing self-centered rather than God-centered living, especially a recent roundtable on binding the strong man. The other day I was reading from Mary Baker Eddy, Her Spiritual Footsteps by Gilbert Carpenter, who wrote about his lessons he learned while working in Mary Baker Eddy's home. In chapter 32, he gives an example of an individual being carried away with selfish thinking, and that he referred to it as a mental drunkenness and unwatchfulness, both of which we are warned about in the Bible and Mary Baker Eddy's writings. Thinking that keeps us from being useful for God. Then the roundtable was followed this week in our lesson by the problems of needing to face the problems of self-will, self-justification, and self-love. Before coming here, the things that I would read and the systems I turned to, in most cases perpetuated and strengthened self-centered thinking. Since coming here and practicing the things I am hearing, and with practitioner support, I am learning to get out of God's way. The changes, healing, and the blessings it brings demonstrates to me the proof of these practical teachings here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Gary.
I've been working on scheduling another business trip recently, and it reminded me of an experience I had a few years ago that I've commented on before, but it was a while ago, and I'd like to relate that experience again. I was scheduling a business trip for early February, the middle of the winter, and it was a trip where it was appropriate for my wife to accompany me. So I called for the help of a practitioner in this church and was reminded to make sure that God governs every aspect of the trip, and that without God's government, I couldn't do a thing and shouldn't try. So anyway, in scheduling the trip and meetings, I took into consideration the fact that my wife is also a practitioner and needs her mornings to take patient calls. We didn't want to miss any services, either Sunday or Wednesday. So taking all of these things into consideration, it turned out that there was only one flight in each direction that we could take and have time to do everything that was needed for church and not miss any services. So I booked those flights and scheduled meetings around them and trusted God to take care of everything. Well, as the time was approaching for us to leave New Jersey, there was the forecast of a severe snowstorm that was forecast to begin about the time that we were scheduled to fly. Well, trusting that God would take care of us, we went to the airport, Our flight, in fact, did board, and we did leave just as the storm was beginning, and all of the flights from Newark after that flight were canceled because of the storm. So we made it to our destination right on time. Well, when it was time for us to leave and come back, there was another storm forecast that was supposed to hit New Jersey about the time that we were supposed to fly and return. So on our knees in prayer, we went to the airport, and our flight did board, and we did arrive back safely in New Jersey just as the storm was beginning, and all of the flights after ours were canceled. I was very grateful to see God taking care of us on this trip, and grateful to be continuing to learn that when we put God first, He takes care of everything that needs to be taken care of. It's a little like to me, it's a little like the covenant that God made with the Israelites many centuries ago, where He promised that if they would worship Him and be faithful to Him, He would take care of them. And I'm grateful that Christian Science teaches us that this covenant was not a covenant for a special group of people at a distant time and place, but rather it is a law that governs the universe and everyone in it, and it's applicable to all of us. So I'm very grateful for the help that I received for that trip. I'm very grateful to Mary Bakeretti for giving us this wonderful science, this wonderful way of life. And thank you, Dede, for those fine readings. It's so good to be here tonight.
Thank you. Louanne from New York, go ahead.
Thank you. Before the blessing of Christian Science came into my life, all I knew about God, I gained from my experiences. To me, He was a power out in the universe somewhere that people spoke of, and I should fear, that took the liberty to bless some and not others. As a child, I had been physically, mentally, and sexually abused. I witnessed some deep, disturbing acts of violence and suffered greatly at the hands of others. Though I prayed often, I was convinced that God wanted nothing to do with me. Although I was not content with suffering, I had become content with the idea that there was no love in the world and that I would always suffer at the hands of others. As I grew up, everywhere I went in life, I became victimized in some way. Every time I went to a doctor for an exam, I was groped or touched in an inappropriate way. Every day at work, I was grabbed at, and fondled by men I worked with. I became so lost in my suffering that I began to rely on the provisions of this world to ease my pain. Cognitive therapy, self-help books, and medications only seemed to fuel my suffering and feed my concept of a world without love. I was in a very bad state of mind when I first called a practitioner from this church for help. It took some time and many strong rebukes on her part to convince me that my suffering was self-conceived. I started accepting the truth she shared with me about my relationship with God and His love for me. I began to trust God and found the strength to stand. I started to see love in the world, at first in my practitioner, in church, then in my community. I stopped seeing myself as a victim of an evil world. I stopped relying on the provisions of this world, and the incidents of victimization stopped occurring. I am so grateful for this healing because it has opened the way for me to be of use to God and to fulfill my purpose in working for Him. It has also allowed me, through inspiration, to contribute to our magazine, Love is the Liberator, with paintings and poems
that before had no room to occupy my thoughts. I have been so blessed to be a part of this church and so grateful to God for all I've been given. Thank you.
Thank you. Wendy from Georgia, go ahead.
Good evening. This past Sunday after church, we went out to have lunch at our favorite restaurant. Upon returning home, I had decided to move some items out into our garage for storage. Then I went about my afternoon doing various tasks. Later that evening, when I went to move my car into the garage, I seemed to have misplaced my keys. Rather than turning to God immediately, like I should have, I instead tried to retrace my steps from when I came home and searched the house from top to bottom, trying to find them. My key ring not only had my house key on it, but also my office key, my car key, and the master key to every room in the building where I work. At that point, I let a little fear creep in and worried about how I was going to get to work and get my daughter to school the next day without a car key, as well as the gravity of losing the master key to the building where I work. After exhausting the material analytical path of searching, which got me nowhere, I sat quietly alone in my room and turned to God for help. I prayed to know that nothing is ever lost and that there is only one mind. Since the subject of our lesson that day at church had been about mind, I focused on knowing the truth about the situation, that there is only one mind, and I listened for God's direction. I was led to go back out into my garage. I didn't argue with the thought that came to me, even though the garage on the surface seemed to me to be the last place that they would be. I had recently stored an antique hoop skirt from the 1800s out there that my daughter had used for an outfit that she had designed for a fashion show at her school. I had set some book bags on top of it. The thought came to me to lift up those book bags, and hidden down in the folds of that hoop skirt were my car keys. This experience reinforced a valuable lesson for me about always turning to God first, not last. I had wasted valuable time exhausting all material solutions when I should have turned to God immediately instead. Two statements from Day Day's readings tonight also reinforced this lesson that I learned. From Proverbs, I will guide thee with mine eye, and from Psalms, the eyes of the Lord are in every place. For this lesson and the many others that I am learning, I am most grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Luba from Ohio, go ahead.
Good evening. My husband had a truck that kept breaking down for the past 2 years. Recently, the truck had to be repaired again. My husband had always been adamant that the truck could be repaired, but this time, after a week or so, he reluctantly agreed the truck had to go. He knew he would need to make a decision on what to do next. Within a week, a neighbor realized my husband was in need of transportation and said he was ready to sell what he had, which was within what my husband was willing to pay, and it was also a newer and more reliable vehicle. I gratefully realized how God governs over everything and that before we call, he will answer. I'm so grateful to Christian Science, to Plainfield, and to my dedicated, loving, supportive practitioner who told me this would all be taken care of properly and that God never fails. Thank you for tonight's beautiful reading, and I'm so grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you. Fairley from Maryland, go ahead.
Thank you. Tonight I want to give my abiding gratitude to Mrs. Eddy for giving us Christian Science. Somewhat by chance, I went into a Christian Science church when I moved to Washington. And then I heard about the book, Science and Health. And so I decided I would read it. And once I read it, I knew it was the truth about life. But then I never was really able to practice it. I mean, the practitioner or whoever I talked with and the class teaching just didn't do it for me. I mean, I wasn't getting anywhere. And then I want to express my huge gratitude, my great good fortune to have found Plainfield on their website when I was just surfing to try to find something about it. And it's meant everything to me. And, I mean, for all this faithful teaching that goes on here, my faithful practitioner who is always on duty for us and leading us in all these studies, Bible studies and roundtables. So I want to thank you for the meeting tonight, which is beautiful, for all the testimonies, for being here tonight, and the beautiful readings. I'm almost coming to tears. I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Florence from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. I have one testimony from France, and it reads as such. With the help of practitioners from this church, I'm realizing that I am the Son of God. Thank you, God, for everything you are doing for me. Erroneous thinking that I wasn't worthy to get any attention from you, I discovered that the truth was exactly the opposite. I am grateful for the change in my work, and I am happy to discover that we are not living in a world of danger. No, we are living in the realm of God good. I am more and more quiet and happy to realize that evil thoughts cannot outline anything in my life. And my own testimony tonight, I'm so grateful to be here, grateful for the powerful citations in the readings. I'm very grateful because I've learned a lot here. And last week, I remember one testifier saying that Plainfield is the real deal. I agree totally. And what I have found that made me think so is because here is where I learned how to put into practice the rules in living Christian Science. Here we are all encouraged all the time not to go out without our armor, and we are shown what that armor is. For example, there is emphasis always on doing the 3 daily duties, on praying to God before we read the lesson, so that we can be inspired with something that we can carry with us throughout the day. Mrs. Eddy's treatment for every day, which can be found on our website under her articles, partly reads thus: there is no evil condition of thought that can argue or suggest or make any law to dominate me or control me, intimidate me, or crush me, or bring any evil to pass upon me, or shut out of my consciousness any good. Also from Bicknell Young's 1937, page 20, he talks about daily protection, where he says that the law of harmony governs everything we do, every event. I have found that using these, putting them in practice, really gives a state of mind that cannot be easily shaken no matter what we find, be it an overwhelming situation at work, if some wrong thought comes, be it any situation that comes up. It gives us a steady mind that all these errors that come don't easily shake or sway us to believe in them. I have found that calmness is like making God's presence, His allness, as was read tonight, our 1+1, that which we know so well, that God is here all the time, guiding, protecting us, and it becomes our 1+1 is 2, that nothing or no one can tell us a lie about. I am so grateful for what is emphasized in this church. Without this, I know I'll be living a different life, probably the same awful, frightening, and timid life that I used to live. I'm so grateful for all the testimonies tonight, the music, and just happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary.
Do have some letters and emails and bulletin board topics tonight. The first, a letter from Ohio. Dear Plainfield, the Bible studies and roundtable discussions have helped me so much in my understanding. This opportunity was never available to me before, and I am so grateful. I have found in Plainfield a true haven. With love and gratitude. And then the church website bulletin board, Florida. Thank you for the guidance shared in last week's roundtable on exterminating error. It was helpful to remember that to exterminate is to completely destroy, with no chance of return, and to stand porter at the door of thought. Funny how something seems so real, error, and has no power of itself, only the life I breathe into it, guilt, fear, doubt, by not dealing with a strong man. Reminds me of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Giant in Ghostbusters that appeared to be so menacing, looming above the skyscrapers in the city. A tiny pinprick would release all that hot air. Psst. Flat and lifeless, nothing to fear. Truth is that little pinprick that dissolves the looming imagination of any mortal fear. What joy to know that God is all in all, and there is no spot where God is not. Thank you, too, for the remedy for handling gossip, to preface thoughts with, "Thus saith the Lord," before speaking. So many pearls were shared. The entire discussion was just what I needed to hear this morning. I would also like to express gratitude for the forum highlights and newsletter that came in the mail last week. Reading them both, I felt such peace from your healing words. Joyful blessings. I love that, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Giant. And then from Wisconsin, at the round table on Sunday, an article on place was mentioned, and it reminded me of the article in the Red Book, also on our website, ascribed to Mary Baker Eddy, entitled Place. I loved my job, but over the years I had offers from other employers for other jobs. They offered much better pay and benefits. I would always go to the article Place and work with it. It begins, "The place you seek is seeking you. The place you need needs you. Divine principle brings need and supply together for mutual good." As it turned out, I stayed with my job for 32 years, and as I am nearing retirement, I realize that God has graciously guided me, and staying in this job was definitely the correct decision. I will also add that when she left, which was just recently, this job, there was just an outpouring of love and gratitude for her service, and I know it was because she was using her science day by day, the best she knew how, and people feel that Christly love when it is expressed. And we know that there is no retirement, there's only further unfoldment of good. And we're looking forward to her being with us more often now that she has freer time. And then, lastly, this is a letter from Germany. I have been sleeping in bed for almost 3 weeks with the flu, and in my search for healing, I have listened to the Bible and Science and Health because I am mostly too tired to read. My search on YouTube for Science and Health led me to your church's readings, and through them, I found the Plainfield Christian Science Church website. The website led me to the Bible lessons, testimonies, etc. I am so thrilled to have found the website and your church. I am currently in Berlin, Germany, and Vienna, Austria, so it is a great to find your amazing resources online. I found Christian Science by singing in the churches as a soloist, and although I have wanted to take class instruction, something has kept me back. I just listened to the Bible study from January 2018 on Isaiah's vision, and now I realize why I resisted taking class. Everything you say is just as I have felt. I am from the Boston area and have sung in many of the branch churches in the Boston area, including the Mother Church. I am writing to thank you and all the church members for all that you are doing to uphold Christian Science. With much gratitude. We have been getting many new calls and people finding our church. I find it interesting because many of them have been lifelong scientists, and yet they have never heard about watching or how to watch, mainly because the books that explain it, the valuable books, are deemed unauthorized by the organization. And also they have mentioned our Wednesday services in which we have an abundance of testimonies. I think we're going to have our meeting from 8:15 to 9:30 because we're always going over. So I am very grateful for this wonderful expression of truth that we have here. Those were beautiful readings tonight. Each week, the demonstration of the readings, and to hear about the omnipotence and the omnipresence of divine love is wonderful. I've always been so comforted by the words, Emmanuel, God with us. A number of years ago, when I was feeling quite overwhelmed by a lot of things I had to do, and also just in my understanding of science, I was trying to do it so humanly, trying to remember all the things I had to do. And so this feeling of being overwhelmed came over me, and we have a magazine. At that time, our magazine was called Healing Thoughts, and it was in an old Healing Thoughts magazine that we had this beautiful poem that helped me, and I've saved it, and I've worked with it at times since then. It's by N.L. Michel, I think, M-I-C-H-E-L, and the last stanza of it is this: If I can fit some heavy heart with wings of hope, and faithful be in little things, can calmly smile and see beyond the woe that seems to be, and serve and give and grow, if I can fill my place in life and sing, then I have lived with God through everything. That is the answer. That's all that's required of us. If we hold our position the best we know how, with joy and gratitude, we can say of ourselves, we have lived with God through everything. I'm so deeply grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you.